What's up guys, it's Punchy, and it's time for a massive Deepwoken update. We've got some crazy additions all around the board towards everyone's favorite oaths, but seriously, you gotta check this out. I don't even know, it might be more insane than last week's update where we got the addition of Deepwoken's Ignition Union origin and its respective dungeon. Anyway, if you want, hop in game for yourself and get the full experience from this update. Regardless, I'll show you what's up and let's get right into it. First off, with the huge change to SILENTHEART, we're finally here with its rework. So let me discuss the previous version of this oath and then we'll explain how it's changed. Previously, SILENTHEART was the oath without mantras, permanently locked out of these options, but they did gain access to other tools. I'm glad to say that in this update, SILENTHEART still doesn't have any mantras, so that's a good thing. But anyway, moving forward with the recap. The previous SILENTHEART oath talent provided the user with 2 posture, 10 HP, and 10% mantra resistance since we couldn't use mantras. Moving into the game, SILENTHEART's entire kit revolved around the engine that is Dread Fighter. Parrying attacks, landing crits, and flourishes built up Dread stacks which increased damage to all of your weapon damage and your mantra resistance. The max possible damage gained was 10% while your resistance capped out at 15, and these stacks could also be used with other talents. If you successfully hit these conditions, you would gain a single stack, but if a mantra hits you, you would lose one. This was all indicated by a unique visual. Next up, we had Lodestar, a talent that silenced enemy players, disabling their ability to cast mantras after hitting them with criticals, flourishes, or uppercuts. After that, SILENTHEART had access to True Vantage, a vent talent. After successfully landing a vent, you gain invisibility and a speed boost, all matching the color of your tattoos. Moving on, SILENTHEART also had access to Merciless Blade. Executing enemies was 25% faster, and that's kind of just it. Now, onto the actual active abilities tied to SILENTHEART. Let's begin with Vengeful Pursuit. With this talent, your running attacks from a distance would send out a slowing crescent projectile that tracked onto targets and prevented them from running. Moving on, Ankle Cutter was also an active ability which occurred while inputting an M1 attack during your slide. This radial slice had extended range compared to M1s and also slowed players down on a hit. And finally, the last move belonging to the old SILENTHEART was Manikari. So, while having some Dread stacks from Dread Fighter, you could input a separate uppercut command teleporting to your enemy with a multi-hit slash, and players would spam this. And with that very short review, that was SILENTHEART before its rework. But with this new rendition of the oath, some stuff was kept and the rest was scrapped, but one thing's for certain, this oath is very flexible. Alright, let's get right into it. So for starters, SILENTHEART is no longer anti-mantra. We can't use mantras, but we can't exactly shut them down fully, and I'll explain what I mean. For starters, the SILENTHEART oath talent no longer gains innate 10% mantra resistance because it's been fully removed. Instead, SILENTHEART players can now equip weapons at a fraction of their requirements to incentivize multiple weapon use. For example, a weapon that requires 100 will now need 75 instead of the full. Let's talk about the new changes. So first off, Dread Fighter essentially works exactly the same, but you no longer gain a damage multiplier to your weapon M1s and crits. This talent is fully used to gain resistance against mantras. Next up, for Lodestar, the talent used to silence mantras has been fully removed from this oath. Applying limited gameplay to other people wasn't exactly fun, and SILENTHEART isn't really anti-mantra anymore, so it's been axed completely. True Vantage, the faster and invisible vent, has also been kept completely. Merciless Blade has also been kept untouched by anything, letting us keep faster grips. Surprisingly, Ankle Cutter also stayed and it wasn't changed, I guess, at all, and that's about everything that isn't new. But now, let's move on to the fun stuff. One of the most interesting things I briefly talked about earlier is cutting weapon requirements by a lot. SILENTHEART is now an oath that incentivizes multiple weapon play from every single weapon class. With the new talent, Unmatched Dexterity, we can simply press X to quick swap to another weapon in our hotbar. This ability lets us completely switch tools in combat, keeping their enchant and stats, and it also opens up insane potential like never before. You can use any weapon combo you want as long as you have that stat investment required, so creativity is actually unlimited with SILENTHEART, which obviously was not the case beforehand. Now, moving on to the new active abilities, let's begin with the replacement for Manikati. The old original version for this move has been cut entirely with a new talent called Rising Star. With the same exact input, we have an uppercut effect that changes per weapon used. Light weapon punts enemies into the air for additional combos, heavy weapon stomps the floor and shoots them up, and medium weapon chin checks players and sends them flying. Each weapon type does something different, incentivizing weapon swapping. Next, with Relentless Hunt, aerial attacks have changed as well for each respective weapon class. With insane tracking and catching potential, you can almost fly at enemies with Relentless Hunt. For light weapon, we slash the air and close the distance with a heavy windup and delayed damage. For medium, we vault forward and slam into enemies with some secondary slashes. And for heavy weapon, we spin twice to deal high damage for additional maneuverability. These are straight up gap closing options, and they will be insane for catching players or comboing. Now, with the talent Mayhem, we get even more options while sprinting around, and if you press dodge and M1 during this sprint, you can do a special attack. For light weapon, you'll be lunging forward towards your enemy with a powerful stab. Medium is kind of the same but with a slash effect, and heavy is a vaulting jump. Also, all of these work alongside Vengeful Pursuit, which still exists as a normal running attack. And finally, with this oath, we have a modifying talent tool called Flow State. So the activation of this tool makes your character glow with a sound which alters the windup of all of these new special moves, and this can be powerful. Essentially, it slows down the windup for each new attack, changing when the active ability comes out for bonus mix-up potential. For example, if you activate Flow, Medium Mayhem, or Heavy Mayhem, these will execute. And that's about it for the new SILENTHEART Rework, which is honestly super cool. They made an oath with nothing and very low diversity, the tools to mix it up, and try out everything. So this might be one of the most creative oaths that I've ever seen, so please experiment and let me know your thoughts. Unrelated to SILENTHEART entirely, we've also received a new talent called Switchblade. This is fairly simple and powerful, allowing your other weapons to use dagger talents while you don't have a dagger equipped, so it's interesting and does allow for cool gameplay. Continuing with all these massive oath changes, we actually got something for the recent Chainwarden oath. Despite this oath dropping with limited content, I'm not gonna lie, this oath is pretty well rounded with a ton of different options. Anyway, moving in game, we have a new mantra for Chainwarden called Impel. Similar to Impel Down, this ability is peak with a main focus on range and applying chains to your target. This mantra is kinda insane and does a lot to apply pressure while also setting up a slowdown. Using Impel normally shoots out damaging projectiles that always place a chain on our target and always pull them in close for a chain lash flourish. The intended use of this ability is to apply chains from a distance with the possibility of a damaging follow-up. I mean, Chainwarden never really had ranged pressure, but this makes up for that completely. I think this mantra is something very powerful and worth checking out. Also in this update, the Chainwarden Mantra Rupture has received a reversal spark which simply pulls the enemy close towards you on the explosion. This looks really fun and honestly just super accessible, and it might be peak for locking down opponents. With some totally new drip, I'm super excited to introduce this because it means a whole lot for the game's community and the fan artist contests. So today we've received a new armor set called the Abyss Wanderer, and if this looks familiar, it's actually from the most recent community contest, but it didn't actually win first place. Fortunately though, this means that even if you cook up something sweet and give it in a contest, it can still be added into the game, which is super exciting. So this drops from several different dungeons and it's super clean in my opinion, and yeah, I love it. Onto some equipment, we've actually received something very new called the Simmerbloom Diadem. This item drops rarely from Asuka, the Pleatski's Inferno boss, and the new Ceramed Hollow dungeon, and actually has a large impact on the Pleatski's Inferno weapon. Normally, this weapon doesn't do anything unique or special on M1s besides dealing damage, but now with this equipped, it has changed. With this helmet equipped, we simply gain Flame M1s to Pleatski's Inferno on hit. There is also a cooldown to this, but on M1, you should be igniting enemies. In my personal opinion, I think that this drip looks really cool and it's effective in combat, but seriously, I think that this makes Pleatski's Inferno just boring as a weapon. It's basically undeniable that this is a massive support to an already decent elemental legendary, but Blazing, Pyrokeeper, and now the Inferno, they all have burning M1s. It's very good in my opinion, but I think it doesn't add anything mechanically interesting to the gameplay of this weapon. Anyway, moving on, with a massive accessibility accessibility update, we have something that will improve combat for absolutely every single player. This week, we've received a new visual parry indicator. For a while now, there's been a small icon under your health bar, as well as the white flash on your posture bar, which tells the player that you can now parry, but that information is easier to access than ever before. Shown in game next to your current health, there's a new meter that shows the progress and regeneration of your parry. Once you press F, this thing will charge up from one side to the next, so you know when to parry. This levels the playing field for absolutely everyone, and I think it's super helpful to keep track of in combat. This is crazy for accessibility, so check it out. Alongside this, we actually got some revisions to the Voidwalker Voidheart base. Previously, before this update, the Voidwalker base had access to a lot of content that was cool in my opinion. They had the crazy Espada table for stancing up and taking pics, a large parkour area which we could run around, and a massive open atrium room that players would also just, I guess, run around in. Players had a ton of room for mobility inside Voidheart, and effectively, I guess, it wasn't fun to deal with. So the Voidheart has been downsized with the removal of the Desolate Garden, and personally, I'm really sad that these cool areas got removed from Voidheart, and I don't know how to feel. Anyway, onto an interesting change to progression. We also have a giant bug fix to kill credit contributions. According to the developers, kill contributions or the damage being dealt was counting just fine, but the credit going to the right player wasn't working at all. When multiple people got involved in dealing damage, sometimes events or bounties would effectively be randomized with the kill credit, but now that's been fixed. In gameplay, you should see a substantial improvement to progression, PvP score, event EXP, and even more if you dealt the highest damage to a specific target. Moving forward, besides these overall game changes, we've actually seen a weird adjustment coming to the Chime PvP game mode. This game mode relies on ELO, or a matchmaking skill system that goes up if you win and drops if you lose. Somehow in this update, the algorithm for this Chime game mode has changed, lowering the points gained for winning slightly while greatly reducing the amount lost on a loss. This change has little impact on overall gameplay, but we'll see how this, I guess, adjusts in the future. Talking about some new changes to the Ignition Union origin, this honestly might be peak. Spawning in with this origin, you now have the talent Union Pager. This talent tool lets you open up a Pager Pip-Boy to accept and complete jobs remotely, and that's just super awesome. Also, let's take a second to look at this UI and hear the sound effects because it's really sick, and yeah, it's just like, it's super cool. Basically, you can collect and complete jobs on the go, and it plays the Deepwoken theme when you finish one up for an extra touch. This is really unique and boosts progression for the origin, and yeah, it's really accessible. Also, we got some new equipment for the Ignition stuff, and this is not specific to, I guess, the Union, but we have the Ignition gauntlets, which also look really cool. And finally, that's about it. So, as always, make sure to check out the weekly Battle Royale to win some games with your friends as the wait for Conquest still continues. If you enjoyed, and if you want to see exclusive update content just like this, make sure to like and subscribe so we can hit 100k subs. We're super close, and let's hit that goal. Anyway, thanks again, it's punchin' time.